What's up, Dragon Brood? Now, it's been a couple of weeks since we've been able to play with Innistrad, or actually Alchemy Innistrad, I guess is how we call it. And it's actually been kind of interesting. If you watch my channel, we've done some regular standard and some Alchemy standard, so I'm kind of learning things between the two. But we've already seen some cards getting used quite a bit, and we don't really know how Wizards is going to come along and rebalance things or what they're going to want to touch or not. I assume with people being out of the office, nothing is going to happen until after the 1st in January, but I think there's some cards we might have on the radar to possibly get rebalanced. So let's talk about that in today's video. Okay, first up, I don't think this first one is much of a question, but Inquisitor Captain. This card is showing up in pretty much anything that plays white creatures, whether you're playing a mid-rangey thing, assuming you have enough small creatures, but then we're playing all of the white aggro decks. It doesn't matter if it's just mono white, if it's Boros, if it's, Gruul, not Gruul, but Selesnya, right? It's being played in all those. And of course, it's actually one of the driving forces in the Clerics decks, which I have to say, in and of itself isn't terrible, but I think this card existing kind of pushes those decks to be played way more than they should be. So there's a good chance we could see something happening to this card, whether we like it or not. So keep your eyes on this if you are crafting these, because I think this could be one on the docket to get shifted. Now, in what way? I don't know. Maybe it's just go get one creature. Maybe it becomes smaller. Maybe it cost one more. There's a few different ways they could rebalance it, but I would expect something to be happening to this card. This one I'm not sure about on Discover the Formula, partly because it's not bad, but it's also like the card that seems to fuel these Azorius control decks through the end of the game. And I feel like most of the time when I've played against them, like, it's usually when this card gets cast that you kind of just go like, well, okay, there goes the game, you know? And I think it's partly because you have other cards that make this cost less, and just multiple things that are kind of combining together to make this an affordable. I mean, I've seen this cast for like 4 mana, then the opponent's hand's loaded, and then everything just goes crazy after that. Now, of the ones we're going to talk about, this is probably one of the lesser problematic cards, so it could get left alone because it's almost like a sum of its parts, really. But it's more because of the other things around it that make it the way it is, if that makes sense. But it was one that, like, if something were to happen in this and maybe it got you 2 cards instead of 3 or whatever, I wouldn't be that upset about it. Okay, Cursed Witch. This is one that is in all of the mono black or black variant sacrifice list. And honestly, like, part of the problem is it already goes and gets cards we don't want to deal with, like the Oven and whatever, which, meh, is what it is. But the problem here, I think, is that it's a 1/2 for 1, so it's already reasonable at blocking, whatever, and then it goes and gets a decent selection of cards to go along with a bunch of other stuff that exists. So I wouldn't be surprised if this got reduced down to either being a 1/1 or costing 2 mana or whatever, because just being 1 mana and giving you that access to those cards is pretty good. However, one of the reasons I bring this card up is something interesting that could happen. Could be that we actually get a situation where they just change the cards you draft. That's something I hadn't really thought about. But it is possible that maybe one of the way you rebalance certain cards like this, you say, okay, the 2 or 3 problematic things they go get, what if you just can't go get those? I mean, something we really haven't thought much about, but it is very interesting to consider. Oh, Sanguine Brushstroke. There is so much I could say about this card. This is one of the key cards to those same sacrifice decks, and honestly, I don't know how I feel about it. Like, the fact that it makes a creature and has an upside even after the creature's gone, and the creature itself is already really good. And one of the things we've run into is not only does it make the creature, it's not like it makes a creature token, it actually makes a card. So when it goes to the graveyard, they can also get it back. And we've seen that multiple times because of things like Blood in the Snow or whatever. So I don't know if this one gets balanced by making it cost more, or maybe it doesn't make you the Blood Artist and it just gives you extra blood tokens, or maybe it just makes a token creature instead of an actual card. I don't know. There's a bunch of ways that this one could be rebalanced, but definitely this is one we're seeing a whole lot right now. Fearsome Whelp. This is one I think is fine, actually. So I don't really know if it's going to get nerfed. One of the things, though, is that maybe, just maybe, Wizards hears a lot of complaints, and that drives the decisions here, right? Because normally you can't really change a normal card based on just complaints. It has to be really doing something to a format, right? But with Alchemy, maybe they decide to treat it as a people pleaser format. And if enough people are just like, I keep seeing all these dragon decks, and don't get me wrong, pretty much every time I play Alchemy, dragons is one of the big decks you play against. So I kind of get it. But at the same time, it does make dragons playable. So I think the card, I want to be clear here, I think the card is fine. But I would not be surprised if something changes here. Now, whether it's you have to choose a card in hand or whatever, I don't know. But there's something here that maybe they could still mess with the dials a little bit. Now, do I think they will? Again, probably not. This is not really doing anything egregious, I guess is the best way I can word it. But I do see a lot of people complaining about running into the dragon decks all the time. So this could be a thing. But to be fair, in the dragon decks, this is one of the few things that really makes those kind of top tier competitive, right? If it wasn't for this card, the draws they don't get it, they're not that insane. So I think this is a fair balance to leave this one alone, but I just wanted to mention it because I know it's something a lot of people complain about. So how many of y'all remember Grizzled Huntmaster when that thing got previewed and we talked about it, right? It took like 15 readings of this card to even figure out what it did. And then it turns out it doesn't really do much of anything. Like, which is kind of crazy, right? That it's also a rare that doesn't really do anything. So I would not be surprised if this card gets, one, streamlined to do something more straightforward that people can understand, but two, also just do something more productive. Because I've seen it pop up in a couple of decks recently, and only one deck did it really do anything worthwhile. I don't think people even understand this card or are using it appropriately, and there's probably some people who have some feel bads because they actually crafted it and then it didn't do what they thought it did. So this is a card that could get rebalanced just for simplicity's sake. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but you kind of want to, if you're going to have a special set like this, and the purpose is to have these cards be played to keep changing up the format, you kind of want them all to be able to be used and do stuff, right? So this is a type of card that while it's not really doing anything bad, it's just not really doing anything right now. And as a rare, I don't think that's what they want in a special set like this. You want the cards to at least be viable and usable. Otherwise, why even have the set, or why have a card be rare? So would not be surprised if this one gets, one, some cleaner language, and two, actually gets to do something productive. So again, it might get untouched and they might just say, it's fine. We still think it's powerful even if people don't do stuff with it. Totally possible. But I don't think that's the case. Would not be surprised if you see this one get rebalanced and possibly upgraded. Key to the Archive. This card, I don't know why when I first read it, I didn't realize it taps for 2 mana. And it lets you go get a card. Like, why? Like, I would not be surprised if this thing gets skimmed back to just tapping for 1 mana and letting you draft. I think that's the thing. Or it could be another one where we just change the option that you get to draft for, since you get such a big advantage of it tapping for 2 mana. Because we don't even have that many rares that do things that tap for more than 1 as is. And usually if stuff taps for 2, we don't get a really good upside like this. And this is one of the driving forces of those, what they're calling key control decks right now. So would not be surprised to see that be an issue here. But I don't know. Like I said, it's very strange. Not a thing I really considered too much of. But I could see this being one of the issues that they do want to come back and change up just a little bit. I don't think they would touch much else. I don't know if you really need to do anything to the cards that you're able to draft with it. I think you're really just going to go ahead and leave the spell book alone and probably just set this to where it just taps for 1 mana. Would not be surprised if we see that. And well, that's it. So the good news is that's kind of a small list, and even a couple of those nothing may happen to, and a couple of them that do are only going to likely get small changes. So I have to give credit where it's due to Wizards of the Coast and say that you actually made a bunch of cards that weren't too crazy overpowered, even though they look that way on the surface, which is good. That's kind of what we want. And it still does vary up the format, and Alchemy does look very different from Standard, so that's also a benefit. So far, the project seems like it's working, but let's wait and see what the first rebalancing looks like, because again, they may still rebalance things in Standard. We don't know what they're going to touch yet. Or they might come back and say again, some other cards that they thought were going to get elevated, or certain decks, may still not be there. So they might end up buffing some cards and not necessarily really just destroying other cards. You know what I mean? Like, it's very possible. So right now, we have no idea where things are going to go or what their mindset is on how they're going to actually deal with rebalancing cards. I'm kind of all ears. I think it could be interesting, but again, I wouldn't expect anything until the first or second week of January, if they do anything at all. So no panic right now. I would say just keep your ear to the ground and pay attention to what's going on, because though they could mess with stuff from Alchemy, that doesn't mean stuff in Standard is off the table just yet. So again, let me know what you think down in the comments. Did I miss a card? Is there a card that's been annoying you in the format that you think needs to be dealt with? Do you think I'm crazy for wanting to put any of these on a list that are going to get dealt with? I'm kind of curious. I think everybody has a different opinion. Anyway, remember, if you'd be so kind, please join the channel and support it for as little as 99 cents a month. But if not, hey, very least, remember to click the like button, the subscribe button, and the notification bell, and hit all notifications, because that makes sure you don't miss anything we're putting out. That's all I have for you for now. We'll see you next time.